Leslie.
Sorry, how long, Mr. Chair? 5 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll start with Commissioner. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to have a couple of questions for ECCC officials. So if they want to join at the table, because I'm not sure they are up here just yet. And my colleague, Mr. Cram, I think did a very good job of outlining some of the more troubling statements made by within your audits regarding the outcome and the track that we are on right now. And so to put simply, to reiterate for those officials that are joining here, because I'm going to ask them some questions about this, are we or are we not on target as claimed by the current Liberal government to meet our 2030 objectives? Targets, I will even say it.
So is this for the department now, or
for you first?
Oh, I think I've answered that one a few times already, haven't I? So we're just for the record, the bankable measures that are in the current 2030 emissions reduction plan, which was issued in 2022, are not sufficient to reach the target of 40 to 45% by 2030. Additional measures would be needed to bridge the gap.
The ECCC officials, now that you've heard the minister or the commissioner's recent remarks on that, in light of previous conversations where it was explained that we are actually only looking at 36% below our target levels, not 40 to 45, despite claims from the minister, parliamentary secretary, and many Liberal MPs. Does ECCC accept the Environment Commissioner's findings that this Liberal government is not on track to meet its 2030 objectives?
Thank you for the question, Chair. First of all, pursuant to the Canadian Net Zero Emissions Accountability Act, the Government of Canada must table a progress report in year 2023 to outline progress that Canada has made towards the 2030 target. In the report that was tabled in Parliament in December 2023, it was very clear that Canada actually has met its interim objective scheduled for 2026 by the degree of 22%, as well as
I need to interrupt here.
36% by 2030. Additional measures need to be adopted as identified in the progress report that we will bring us to 40%.
Okay,
and in fact,
thank you. I'd like to bring this back to normal person talk. Do you agree with the commissioner of his statement that you're not on track? Yes or no?
The report clearly sets that Canada is reaching 36% by 2030. With additional measures being adopted, we're able to be on track to reach 40%. And that is clearly outlined in the report table in Parliament.
So could you explain to me why you would be advising parliamentarians to say things that are well above and beyond that in the House of Commons and publicly?
So in the report table in Parliament, we clearly said that Canada is on track to 36%, and with additional measures adopted, we're able to reach 40%.
I know what it says, but here's what Canadians are asking. The commissioner under the Auditor General says one thing, and the partisan politicians that are claiming something say another thing. The question that people ask me is, well, who would I believe? To me, it's a pretty simple answer. So who should we believe?
So again, the report was tabled in Parliament subject to international domestic stakeholders review. And therefore also in September, the Government of Canada also has asked the Net Zero Advisory Body, which released a report in September recommending to government additional measures that can help the government to reach the 40 to 45% by 2030.
Okay, I appreciate you bringing it back to bureaucratic speak.
Order, Mr. Chair.
Let's be respectful.
Yeah, I think it's really unnecessary to talk down and condescend to our
I'm speaking like a normal person. Are there performance bonuses within ECCC and whether or not they succeed at these targets? And has one ever been awarded based on that report that was tabled previously that you talked about?
I'm not able to really answer that question on behalf of the entire department.
Well, however you want to. Has there been any?
He'll answer the question. Yes. Continue, please. Not able to answer on behalf of the entire department.
Not able to answer on behalf of the department. That being said, different objectives and deliverables are set, in a particular year. I do not believe that any particular official will be asked to be accountable for an objective that is a shared jurisdictions between federal government, provinces, and territories.
Okay, so is there a chance they can get a bonus? Because it seems clear that those at the political level are not held accountable for when the failures exist. Are there performance bonuses if targets are met or if they're not?
I don't think the Department of Environment is Exxon. I don't think it's a business. I don't think you get bonuses if you meet a certain sales target.
CBC does.
That's my understanding, but what do I know? Anyway, time's up to Mr. Leslie. No, is it Mr. Leslie? I have Mr. Leslie twice. Is it? Yeah?
It's up and down. How long?
5.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, through your audit, you discovered that the Liberals had not conducted value for money assessments on 5 of their measures. What does that mean, and why would you think that they should be?
So value for money is very important because several of these measures have substantial price tags associated with them in terms of Canadian taxpayers or the private sector or the government itself in the case of subsidies and so on. So value for money is important because it gives Canadians a sense, if you do a proper value for money assessment, it gives Canadians the sense that they're getting good bang for the buck, using a more colloquial term for the use of taxpayer money. So essentially, you're showing your calculation to the Canadians that we're spending this billions of dollars and we're expecting X value, and you quantify that. We've talked about that here, and we talked about that in the Net Zero Accelerator report from earlier this year. It's an important accountability measure in a nutshell.
I agree. And through your audit, did the department explain why they wouldn't do that?
So, Ms. Leach, can address that?
Yes, thank you. There's a good explanation for that. We had made a recommendation, so recommendation 7.34, that the government establish a government-wide approach and guidance for value for money assessments. And the Department, Environment and Climate Change Canada, had only partially agreed with that. And the reason that they stated that, the value in federal decision-making is very multifaceted. It includes things like society, culture, health, Indigenous, territorial relations that are outside the remit of ECC. So there are many things that are important besides money.
Sure. Thank you. You mentioned the whole of government approach, which is something that gets thrown around a lot, but you also alluded to some of the silos that certainly still exist across departments when we have as many measures, although maybe not successful measures, but measures nonetheless that the government has attempted to undertake here. And the claim of a whole of government approach, how do you explain the silos that still continue to exist that lead to things like double counting of emissions, a lack of credibility of the modeling, and going back to the previous audit on the $2 billion tree program? How does this happen so frequently under this government?
Yeah, so that's one of the conclusions from our first report under this act from last fall, is that the system that Canada uses, and I'm just talking about the federal government, we're ignoring the other jurisdictions for now, but in terms of coordinating the efforts in a horizontal way, which is the term that's used by the federal government in Canada, they have not nailed that yet. Essentially, there are problems in terms of coordinating amongst Environment and Climate Change Canada, NRCan, ICET, and so on. And without there being a central agency or a central approach to this, you have the potential for, and in actual fact, double counting and even sometimes cases of working at cross purposes. So our recommendations from our first report last fall, if implemented, could help address that very important problem in terms of siloed approaches at the federal government level.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned in the audit that the recent decreases or getting closer to the gap of the 2030 targets were attributable due to revisions in data and modeling methodologies. Could you explain a little bit of what those changes were? And in your experience, have you ever seen a government make changes to their data modeling that made it further away from the target they're trying to reach, or only closer?
So these updates to the modeling are done to make the projections more accurate. And it's not just Canada doing them. Some of them come from calculations about the warming potential of various different greenhouse gases, not just CO2, but the other ones as well. So Ms. Leach can explain that in greater detail. But to answer your last question there, I don't know each time that they've modeled it whether it's brought them closer or further. The point isn't to remodel to make it further or closer, it's to make it more accurate.
Yeah, and we also have the department here who can tell you more about exactly the differences in the modeling, but yeah, we have pointed out in one of our paragraphs, which is 7.26, that some of the measures that the initial estimates of emission reductions were high in the beginning, and sorry, they were different. So the revised estimates were lower than originally anticipated in 6 of the 12 funding measures that we looked at, which means that the modeling was not as accurate in the beginning as